Hi. So today I'm going to be sharing parts of my journey. It feels like it's the right time to do it. So much has happened over the last 6.5 years, like my son's whole life basically. And prior to that, I'd say another 2 years added on top. So let's start from not the beginning. Definitely not the beginning. We are going to just talk about different aspects of my journey and we're going to go from there. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was just the journey itself. Like why the journey? And not just why the journey, but when you start realizing that you're on a journey, you have no idea not only what that journey is going to look like, but how long that journey is going to take. Not only for you to reach a destination, but as soon as you complete one journey or you feel like you've completed one journey, there's another journey that's happening as well. So it's almost like you're constantly on a path somewhere, and it can be so exhausting, especially when you're trying to work towards something, especially when you're trying to achieve something. And that's why I think it's really important to also recognize where along that journey that you need to take breaks, you need to take a stop, you need to pause, you need to take a rest, catch your breath, drink some water, and maybe even take a day, because it can be absolutely incredibly wild. They say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And I actually have a friend right now that I know who's doing a very long walk, almost like a pilgrimage down Camino de Santiago. And it's like she's walking, I think, 500 miles. She's doing about 8 to 18 miles per day or something like that. And I'm watching her journey and it is inspiring me so much. And it's reminding me so much of the journey of life, okay? Because life itself is showing me right now so many different aspects. Like last night I was laying in my bed and all I could think about was like these random flashbacks of like being in primary school and certain altercations that happened in primary school, certain things that were relevant and important back in those days, how I felt, what I was experiencing, and it just made me realize, like, hold on a minute, like, why am I getting all these random flashbacks? And then there was some other flashbacks that occurred from another aspect of my life, and that's when I start kind of tuning inwards and recognizing that my body needs to be still and needs to be acknowledged. And then once I have acknowledged what it is that my body is going through, then I try and transmute that through movement and or breath. And that is, from my personal journey, how I alchemize my feelings. And sometimes that includes journaling, stretching, mindfulness. And sometimes I don't have the space to do that. Sometimes I'm literally in the middle of a working day with my kid, and for a lot of people you might be at work or taking care of somebody else, and I want you to know that all those experiences are so important and so valid, and you need to honor the position that you're in and just do whatever you can to help yourself regulate. And nowadays I'm recognizing there's a lot of conversation about regulation. Like, I don't think people even knew this word many years ago, but regulation is basically allowing the flow of your body's natural biological processes to kind of move through in the natural rhythm of your body. And dysregulation is when that's not happening because of a potential threat or fear or panic. And it's when your body is basically in fight or flight mode and you're unable to separate what's actually happening with what you feel is happening inside your body. And a lot of those times it's that lack of safety, it's the fear of whatever it is, like as if, oh my God, my child is behaving like this, and all of a sudden you start feeling like a tiger is chasing you, when actually it's just your child doing something that you think or feel is like triggering you to back into your childhood, you know? And I had this random reflection this morning when I was washing my dishes about anger, because I have experienced a lot of rage over these last God knows how many years, not just because of the world at large and the experience that I'm having witnessing that, but I'm also experiencing a lot of rage from like generationally and intrinsically around societal, cultural perceptions, the gender stuff. Like, it's wild. And not just that, it's just the actual hatred towards women that I feel occurs very much so in our society, both from men and from women. And I feel like that really puts women in a really difficult position, because it means that they have to armor themselves and mask who they truly are with whatever it is that they need to, in order to protect themselves, not only from getting hurt, but from basically getting killed, okay, in the metaphorical sense and the physical sense. And it's really crazy, because so I'm like at the sink and I'm like thinking about anger, and I'm wondering, like, I have a friend who was talking about this yesterday and was mentioning about how her husband has like a really bad temper. And it was kind of like in like a general jesty conversation. They have a lovely relationship. It's not that he's doing anything in that sense, but he does have a very strong like anger response when it comes to being angry. And I've known this man for very many years growing up and stuff, and it made me realize, like, oh my God, like, I remember growing up and thinking that when someone was like super angry, that was a form of like authoritative, like, it was like that to me was like the authority, like the person who's angry holds the power in the room. And that was such a messed up concept, because as I've grown and learned through my own personal experiences, through studying psychology, through studying human behavior, it was only when I was silenced from expressing my own opinion and expressing my own anger and emotion, that I realized that by being angry or expressing my anger in a particular way, it was only giving more power to the other person. And I think that was probably like the biggest revelation I've ever had in my life, because, I used to fear the angry person in the room. I would respect them more so because they somehow held the authority. And I grew up thinking that if I knew how to be angry well, that I would be able to get through life. And another really interesting thing that I was just thinking about on the car on the way home just now was fairness. And I was thinking how unfair it is that my son, I'm teaching my son, we teach our children about fairness and about how to be fair and how to share fairly and how to do all these things. And my mother's words came to mind, which she used to say to me growing up, which is, life is not fair. And as I grow older, I realize that there is no such thing as like fairness in life. And she's so right. It's not fair. And it's so sad that we are, going to be teaching our children how to act fairly and make decisions fairly. And yet we know deep down that life is not going to treat them in that same way. And that in itself is unfair. So these are just some of the things that have been coming to my mind over the last day and a half that I really wanted to share with you about where I have where I'm at on my journey. I keep looking that way because I can see in my wild garden right now that there is like a ton of butterflies, and they keep calling my visual attention. So but the reason why I chose to share these little things with you is because I feel like they are speaking to my younger self in this conversation, and essentially speaking to you guys as well, because it's really important that we kind of think about these things. Like, what is anger? What is fairness? What is journey? You know, what is struggle? And understanding that everything is not black and white. Healing is not linear. This isn't a journey of like stepping stones, okay? We talk a lot about stepping stones in like high school and career and things like that. And it's funny because I've had a recent reflection about my career and things like that recently, because I've been going through something in one of my volunteering experiences that I do, where I'm going to have to make some really difficult decisions and have some really difficult conversations, which I've already had some of them. And it's reminding me that nothing is forever and nothing is certain, and journeys start and they also finish. And it might be a case that one of my journeys is coming to a close, or it might be a case that it isn't. But the realization that there's a big reflection in regards to how I felt when I was growing up in my career. I just remembered that feeling of wanting a particular position that somebody else has, and not necessarily wanting to replace them, but wishing to get that promotion, for example, and there's somebody standing in the way of that, and how difficult that is to face when you know deep down that the only logical thing would be to promote you because of how hard you work. And this is where the fairness concept comes in again, because these things that happen at workplaces and, you know, at different organizations, it, like I said, it's not always fair. And the quicker that you can come to terms with that, the less conversations you're going to have around how it wasn't fair. That's like the number one thing that would literally reduce the energy output by a massive amount. I think recognizing that everything happens maybe sometimes for a reason that you can't tell, and that maybe rejection is just a redirection into something else, you know, or maybe God is protecting you. And that's a really big like mantra that's kind of surfacing through our social media feeds if you're into kind of self-development and things like that. But the idea that rejection is God's protection, and in hindsight it makes sense. And I don't remember who said this. I think it was Steve Jobs saying that you can never see, not the outcome, but you can never see the dots. You can never see how the dots connect going forward, but you can looking back. So when you look in hindsight, you can see very clearly, especially if you're like spending time on self-awareness, you're, you know, regulating yourself, or you're meditating, or you're journaling. And even if you're just a very self-aware person, you will see how that has probably been the case for many situations in your life. And I just recorded something about my audacious moves that I've made in my life that my younger self would be super proud of, and I can't wait to share more of that with you. So stay tuned for that piece of content. But I wanted to let you know that that is exactly what I mean. Like, in those moments, those are some of the hardest decisions I've had to make in my life. And yet, when I look back, I'm so proud of the girl who made those decisions. I'm so proud of the version of me that felt brave enough to have the audacity to go and do that thing and to go and be that person. So yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about where I'm at. I just felt this calling to just press record, and I'm so grateful for it because it's taken me many years to get the courage, not only courage to come forward and record myself, but also to build in the background my life in a way that I can express something to you. So I'm here expressing something to you, and I hope that it's given you something to reflect on. I'm not here to share hacks and tips and answers necessarily, and maybe one day I might do that, I don't know, but for now I actually just want to share some of the thought processes that I'm having in my day-to-day life that are helping me integrate aspects of my younger self to help me grow into the version I'm meant to be tomorrow. So I'm sending you all lots of love. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you soon.